because I have some students coming. Hola, David. Glad you could make it.
No problem. I'm so sick right now.
COVID or?
No, it's a cold.
It's a cold, muy bien. Just get some rest, drink some tea.
Yeah, I'm drinking water and tea right now.
Excelente, muy bien. Hola, Ashley. Hola, Nicole y Astrid, ¿cómo están? The day has come, Nicole. The day is here. Lizbeth, you haven't met Lizbeth.
Hola, I know. I'm so excited.
You get to fangirl out. Is that like, am I making that up or?
That's the thing.
Huh?
That's the thing.
Oh, okay, muy bien. Hola, Astrid. Hoy, Astrid, a las 3 nos vemos? Or next Monday?
Next Monday?
Sí, está bien.
Okay.
She's here. All right. She's at the waiting room. Where's Ashley? Oh, no, she stopped. I mean, where's Erica? See, I'm nervous already too. Let me go get my fan. I'll be back. Because I'm fanning out anyway. Get it? Anyway, stop. I guess that's why they call fans, no? Because you need them. Like, because it gets warm, so you need the fan. Hola, Kenneth. ¿Cómo estás?
Bien, ¿y usted?
Bien, bien. Hola, Lizbeth de la Cruz Santana. Mucho gusto.
Hola, mucho gusto.
We're so happy you're able to join us. I know Erica, you're here. She's been, contacting you, and I know her and a bunch of other students, including myself as well, are just very honored and excited about your work and sort of, this line of fields of work that you're doing. And I know that for, if I'm exaggerating, señoritas, just tell me, but I feel like you're a role model for many of us, but especially for a lot of the Latino women or just women in the room. And so much so that like Armando Nevares like went and got a haircut for your talk today, and I was gonna do so too, but I forgot, ¿verdad? Pero no, thank you.
No, gracias. No, yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I've been in touch with Erica for the magazine, also for my cycle. So it's really nice to see faces and connect names. And yeah.
And so this is a Latinx class for that. You can speak in English, Spanish, or Spanglish. And we've been sort of reading a lot of different contemporary Latinx authors. Most of the texts were written in English. Javier Zamora, unaccompanied, Citizen Illegal, Jose Olivares, and we've had a couple of other speakers. On Wednesday, we have Magali Lopez, if you want to join us or if you want to share the information with others. She does research in UCLA, so a lot of the discussions here are very sort of personal and intimate. So welcome, and I don't want to sort of eat up all the time talking because I'm really good at that, but I'll just let LASO do their thing, right? The Latin American Student Org, who is helping sort of fund and bring you virtually to class. So, gracias.
Yeah, gracias.
Hi, I'm Ashley Estrada. I'm the president of Latin American Student Organization.
Sorry, my computer is freezing. Hi, I'm Erica. I'm the vice president of the Latin American Student Organization.
And then we have Kenneth Sandoval. He's the secretary of Latin American Student Organization.
Hello.
I would love to present Lizbeth de la Cruz Santana. She is a first-generation Mexican-American Chicana student of color. Lizbeth grew up in Compton, California during her childhood and Fresno, California in her late teen years. Her upbringing as a member of mixed status family formed her consciousness of the immigrant experience in the US. As a first-generation Latinx student, she values her privilege in earning a college education and is working and paving the road for others like herself to pursue higher education. De la Cruz is a US President Pre-Professorate Fellow for the academic year of 2020-2021. During this time, she will be writing her doctoral dissertation. Currently, she is facilitating the installation of the Leave No One Behind mural project, a collaboration with organizers and allies who are advocating for the return to the U.S. of deported U.S. military veterans, childhood arrivals, and family reunification. Recently, she was awarded a fellowship to attend the 2020 podcasting The Humanities Winter Institute, hosted by the National Humanities Center and the Digital Humanities Center of San Diego State University.
Un aplauso virtual, ¿no? Un aplauso virtual. Bienvenida. I've enabled screen share just in case.
Yeah, so I'll do it in English. Jan, is so happy to see you here. So Jan's someone that we're working with and has linked up with the Leave No One Behind mural project, which is the new project that I'm collaborating with. So it's really nice to see you here. So I'll do it in English just to make sure that everyone's able to understand the presentation. And I would love to start first with a video just to provide more of a context and visual representation of the Playas de Tijuana mural project. It's around 3 minutes, so it should be pretty short, but still hopefully the messaging gets across. And I'll share that right now. Okay.
Para que no se crucen. 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 Para que está dispareja. Sí, está muy alta. Para que no se crucen.
Wake up. Look at these political and sociological implications. Color your skin. That in itself has implications and shit. That are only there if we act on them collectively as people. If we don't act on these social implications, that they don't exist. You know?
Dressed as a little girl to cross the border, chaos and disorder exported us to where Mexico was before. Crash landed, speaking Spanish, people looking like I'm from another fucking planet. I picked up on it, stuck out my antennas to scan it, assess the life forms and mic songs about the madness. Stayed in the shadows of the trees to manage, kept it low key with no idea I couldn't have it. Was turned away from clubs with the subtle sadness, but put that gloom in the boom with the moonlit magic. Unidentified flying object across the canvas of the night, people pointing and reporting sightings, hoping immigration slides and abducts my family. On some District 9 shit, have my people scrambling. Whether I fight or take flight is from my life, I'm gambling. All the times I had to have a homie drive behind me, so a cop couldn't pull up and get right behind me, cause they might pull me over, tow my spaceship and find me. Then after that you might not ever find me. Yeah, see, it was almost like taking a bullet when you're perceived as an alien. Police more likely to pull it, kill you off the books if you're undocumented, wipe your footprints, but can't cover up my tracks. Facts can't overlook this.
So that was basically a trim of a documentary that I'm currently working on for the Playa de Tijuana Mural Project. At this moment, the introduction is completed. So if you're interested to watch the entire thing, like the first introduction, that's available on YouTube as well. And I could share with Erica so she could share with you all. My intention with documenting the Playa de Tijuana Mural Project is to provide something back to community, especially the storytellers who have shared their stories with us and their faces are on the border wall in Playa de Tijuana, which is at the initial point of the US-Mexico border. And with the idea to also allow for audiences beyond the border to see this mural, to see how it was all created. That's the importance behind this documentary that I hope to finish next year once I finish my my PhD degree at UC Davis. So it's a complement to my doctoral dissertation. So that way people, besides just reading what I've been researching, they can also see it and hopefully in person touch the mural. So it's just a, I feel like a all around circular project that I feel like it will never really end in the creative process. So as you were able to see, this mural is located between San Diego and Tijuana, and it's actually on the Mexican side. Unfortunately, we can't paint on the US side because this area in Playa de Tijuana is known as the no man's zone. So no one can really reach that point of the border without Border Patrol taking you away or telling you to leave. So unfortunately, that's not a possibility at the moment, but on the Mexican side, there's so much art. This point here is called Friendship Park, and there's many other murals, but I feel like this specific mural is the first one and only one that includes faces, realistic faces of migrants, and also the QR codes that once you scan them, you're able to hear their own voices, see their photos, and really understand what deportation means for them and their own experiences. And then also their arguments about why is it unethical to deport migrants that enter the US as minors or as babies, and then also about family separation. So for me, they are the real knowledge creators in regards to this topic about deportation and family separation. So just to provide a little bit of context, I started my PhD at Davis in 2016 in the fall. And that's when I started my research as a researcher for humanizing deportation. This project at the moment has more than 300 digital narratives elaborated by community storytellers who are telling you a little bit more about their migration experience, specifically linked to deportation. So we focus first in Tijuana, and that's where I first came in as an adult and was able to see this border wall and its magnitude and just what it represents for families that have links on both sides of the country, but specifically for childhood arrivals, what it means to be displaced out of a country that you've grown in. You only know English, for example. You may know some Spanish, but it's not the Spanish that is spoken in Mexico. Your The way that you dress, the way that you walk is US American. So what happens to you when you get displaced to a border town, for example, like Tijuana, or decide to move back to the interior of Mexico? So for me, the border wall reflected more than just this public prison that I see here at Friendship Park, but more so about the complexities about coming back to a country that you were born in, but you don't have any cultural or family ties to. So it really complicates the idea of belonging and you're longing to return back to the country that really that's where you feel like you belong and rightfully should belong. So as I mentioned earlier, there's so much art at Friendship Park. And for me, when I came in there in 2016, I realized that the border wall was really being taken by community with stories, with names, with all of these photos that really brought community together and really allowed for any of the visitors, because Friendship Park is one of those landmark places where people from all over the world go and see. They always want to see what's going on in Friendship Park. You have buses of people from like all over the world just trying to figure out what this space means. And for me specifically, the upside down US American flag was the one that spoke to me the most. It's one of those flags that contains the names of so many of the deported veterans from the US who served in our military, but because of their I would say permanent residency status and non-citizenship, they were displaced and deported out of the country after serving in the military. So you would see that at the end of the day, any migrant who is not a citizen from the US is, deportable. And that's something that you're able to understand from this artwork that is here at the border, but also through the stories that our storytellers have allowed for the public to understand and hear and also share. So something that really I've taken so much from Friendship Park and the artwork that is left there by storytellers is these two photos here at the bottom. The first one is let us cross. So what does that mean? Obviously, I feel like the messaging is super, blunt and straightforward. They just want to come back to the US. But the second one, the 10 years, when I first took this photo in 2016, I was not sure what that meant. Something caught my attention. I took a photograph. And then back in 2017, when I returned to Tijuana to live there for the summer to do fieldwork research for humanizing deportation, I realized that 10 years means the 10-year bar, which means that for 10 years, any person who has been deported cannot return to the US legally. They can't petition to return, and they have to wait those 10 years outside of the country and basically are forced to assimilate in some way to Mexico in this specific context. So for me, 10 years, you can do so much in 10 years. In 10 years, so many things can happen. So what happens when you have children who are left behind in the US, or when you have no one back home in Mexico or in the US that can support you? So at the end of the day, through story sharing and also the artwork that is at Friendship Park, I echo the words from my advisor, Robert Irwin, that community storytellers are the knowledge creators. They're the ones who are guiding research. They're the ones who should be guiding policy for more of the humane aspect into understanding that each case is so different and that at the end of the day, our borders are just reproducing, racism, racial profiling, and are really just hurting the communities of color that we see represented in the border wall and specifically in the mural in Playas de Tijuana. So the method of digital storytelling was the one that really guided my inspiration behind the Playas de Tijuana mural project. As a researcher and digital storytelling facilitator, I got to learn a lot about the different stories about Montserrat, for example, with this first video here, Mamá Leona contra el Muro. She had a children's book and she wanted to adapt it into this narrative that you can see here and share. I also got to work closely with the Estrada family, Carla, who is also represented in the mural, and then to learn about the stories of Tania Mendoza, Isaac, and many others who have really, I feel, contested the fact that once you're deported, you're forgotten. So it's something that Tania would always say, that she would always remind me that, in the US, you have the DACA recipients or the dreamers. Those people always worry about them. They want to protect them from deportation. But what happens when you were deported before DACA happened? What happens when you get deported even when DACA is in place? You're still deportable, and then once you're gone, people do forget about you. And it's a reality that unfortunately is kind of true in Mexico, and you're just left behind. And no one really worries about you returning to the US, or they don't really fight for you. But now recently in the last couple of years, there's different organizations like Otros Dreams en Acción, ODA, in Mexico City that are there. They're creating community to support the returned and displaced community. So there's hope, right? But at the end of the day, the battle to return back to the US still persists. And unfortunately, even with this new administration, there's no solutions that have been provided to lawfully allow them to return to the US or fight their cases within the US. So just to provide a little bit of more of a context for the Playas de Tijuana mural project, these are the faces that are currently displaced on display, on the border wall. So we have Andy de Leon, which is a deported military veteran from Madera. So I'm currently in Fresno. Madera is like 15 minutes from me. So Andy is one of those people, when I first met him, I was like, wow, like the childhood arrival definition that we know of at this moment linked to just DACA and the Dreamers is wrong, because Andy is also a childhood arrival. He can also be considered as a dreamer, but unfortunately, because he's older, people won't really understand that he is also a childhood arrival. But he came in as a minor to the U.S., had permanent residency, served the military, but then was deported. Then we also have Montserrat Godoy with two citizen daughters, and she hasn't seen them since she got deported. Her ex-husband doesn't allow her to see her kids, so she's in Tijuana, not being able to see her daughters and hardly have any contact with them. And the same thing with Tania, childhood arrival from Jalisco, grew up in LA. Her family tried to do it the right way that we always hear, right? Get in line, do it the right way. And they did. But unfortunately, there was a lawyer malpractice. So then she grew up with a deportation order. And then we have Isaac, and then Carla Estrada and Jairo, which are dreamers. But Isaac was deported before DACA was implemented. He has no criminal record and was just deported because Border Patrol needed to meet quota for that month. So he didn't do anything wrong. He was just going to church on a Sunday with his pastor, and Border Patrol basically identified their car. Two brown men. Why not, right? Why not stop them? So that's what happened in his case. And with Carla, her brother was deported, and then both of her parents returned to Mexico because the younger brother had never been in Mexico. The language barrier was another issue, and he really had no one back in Mexico. So both the parents who were undocumented in the US also returned. So she was separated from her family. But now, thankfully she does have permanent residency at this moment. So she's able to come back and forth, which, not all the families have that privilege. And then Jairo Lozano graduated from Fresno State here in the Central Valley with a master's. So I feel like in his case, just having the cap and gown allows you to see that if dreamers, right, or childhood arrivals are provided the opportunities to assimilate to the country, provide, and just live, the life that they deserve, then they could do so many great things. They can get those degrees, they can do the jobs, that they have aspired to have. But unfortunately, not everyone has that possibility. And then we have John Guzman, who is also a close friend of mine. He was deported, but because he was really well known in his community for being a runner, and then something changed in policy, he was able to fight his case and return back to the US. But as you can see, at the end of the day, the successful stories, right, like those who were still able to return to the US or be here, are just a small percentage. Not everyone has that possibility. And then in Montserrat and Tania's case, you have this complexity about motherhood. So what happens when you get deported and you're a mother? What happens to your children? So it seems like not only are you displaced out of the place that you knew as your home, but then you also question what motherhood means beyond the border. And that's, at the end of the day, they're taking those rights away, and their children are being born, like raised in the US without their mother. So then you have this generation of kids who are growing up without their parents. And this is also the case for males, right? That grow up, their kids grow up without the father figure in their home. And at the end of the day, I feel like these stories that were selected as part of the mural project really highlight that complexity. It's not just deporting criminal migrants, right? But it's the idea that you're really displacing communities that have really strong links to the US, and also to question what criminal means, right? Like what crime is it that they made that, made them deportable? And something that Daniel always mentions is that when people realize that you're deported, they ask you, so you should have done something wrong. You probably did something wrong. You probably deserve this. But at the end of the day, many of them had nothing, in their criminal record. So it's just a fact that they were migrants, and they were just, passed from the police into immigration custody, and that's how they got deported. So one of the stories that really inspired this project was Jorge's. Unfortunately, he was not part of the mural project. And that's something that, happened in the selection of stories. Many of the storytellers weren't able to participate because they didn't want to disclose their identity. And that's something that digital storytelling also considers. So in many other cases, their images were blurred out, their names were changed. But in Jorge's case, he was a childhood arrival who came in from a really young age. And I would love for him to just speak for himself. And I'll play his audio so you can kind of like understand a little bit about his story.
That's fine. I try to fight my case in immigration court. I try to fight my case and explain to the judge, you know what, Your Honor, I've been here since I was 8 months old. I had no idea I was undocumented, but if you give me the opportunity, I will fix my status. But there was no way to fix my status. I'm not from the US, but Mexico doesn't consider me part of Mexico either. I had no country. Nobody wanted me. Or
So as you were able to hear from his own voice, and I do encourage you all to listen to his story, I feel like from the entire Humanizing Deportation archive, this story really allows you to see that, you know, the US does criminalize migrants, and specifically child arrivals are the ones who suffer the most because, as Jorge will continue to tell you in his story, he came in as a baby, did know that he was born in Mexico, but didn't really understand what legally that meant. And unfortunately, the moment that he had this, you know, encounter with the police, that's where he found out that he was undocumented and what that meant. And it changed his entire life. He was deported at 19, returned back to the US a few days later, because what are you gonna do if someone takes you out of your home and you wanna return? You're just gonna go back, right? So then that allowed him to obtain this unauthorized reentry, which criminalizes his reentry. So now he's, you know, eligible to be, you know, taken into custody, and then he was deported again. So I think if they child arrivals face even more barriers when they get deported and return back to the country.
that's fine.
So at the end of the day, just to kind of start closing up, and because I do want to engage more in conversation and hear your thoughts and questions, my dissertation basically allows me to understand who counts as childhood arrivals to the US, meaning that in policy, meaning that in public perception, and then also in that community's perception. Do I matter as a child arrival? And if I do, why? Because I also want to understand their own experiences to understand why, you know, some of them decide to stay in Mexico and why some become activists and are really fighting hard to return back to the US. So we have, you know, stories like Tanya's. You can also scan her QR code. I've made a few of different art pieces where you can just download them and scan them and share them online. Just because I do want people to see and hear their stories to hopefully, you know, allow them to have the tools and the support legally that they might need to return to the US or to know what opportunities they have for their immigration case. And I just want to, you know, provide a little bit more about the mural project. So this project was only made possible because I was granted a fellowship with the Mellon Public Scholars in 2019 in the summer. And I had the support of Mauro Carrera, who was the lead artist of the project, Enrique Chu, he facilitated the border space. And then my professor and advisor, Marcel Montoya, who was, you know, my mentor throughout this whole project. So I honestly, I just worked with a lot of men. I was the youngest one in the entire project, but I think it all just happened so quick. We didn't have any barriers whatsoever. I didn't need a permit to paint on the border wall. And we had the community there who wanted to paint with us. So at the end of the day, they painted their own portraits, which was something incredible for us to see that many of them had no artistic experience before, but they were able to create beautiful art pieces, their own faces. So besides the digital storytelling component where they represent themselves, they also represented themselves through art. So one of the photos that I feel like really evokes that idea is Isaac, who painted his entire portrait almost by himself. So you can just see that if we allow and provide the tools for community to really represent themselves, then they'll do a great job and just to continue advocating for themselves. And as you can see, we had different groups throughout August, September, and then January in 2020, just fixing up the mural, making sure it looks great because as you're able to tell, the mural is located on the beach. We have, you know, we had to work through the weather, the hot sun, the rain, just the salt, and hopefully it still lasts there for like around 10 years. So that's the idea behind the project and just the materials that we use. So I do invite you all to share, you know, the stories through like social media or just anyone that you think might, you know, really be able to use this as a way to start thinking about immigration in a whole different way. And to also, if you need to present or talk about the mural project, I do make a lot of these materials free and accessible online that you're able to just share. And if hopefully you're able to go to Tijuana, just scan the QR codes and share it, and tag the project on social media as well. And I'll just close it with that, and because I do want to have more time to engage in conversation. But you can follow the Playas de Tijuana Mural Project on all the social medias that you can see here. We do use, I use more of the Instagram versus anything else, just because it's artwork. And just to close it off, my idea was always to continue working and painting the border wall. That extension from where the border wall starts to where it ends, it's allocated to me to work on this project. But unfortunately, with the pandemic, I wasn't able to go back and have access to the beach. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to paint the new faces with community up at the border. So instead, now we're working on this project called Leave No One Behind, which you could also follow on social media. The first art pieces are created by Javier Salazar Rojas, which is known as a portrait artist on Instagram. And the same idea, we're just, really looking into highlighting the stories of those who have faced deportation and are also deportable in the US. We have dreamers, deported veterans, mothers, anything that you could imagine, just anyone who is a non-citizen. And we have the same idea with the QR codes that you can scan. And we're currently placing these all over the US and in other countries of interest as well. So yeah, and if you want to get in touch with me, I have my Instagram and my Twitter and also my email here for reference as well. So thank you, and I look forward to just talking to you all.
Bien.
I think he froze, right? I'm not, yeah. Mm. So if you like, we could just go into the Q&A. Meanwhile, it comes back.
I was about to say, yes, if anybody has any questions now for Lizbeth, I do also have, or you said you're going to send me your information so I can send it out to the class later too. Okay, yeah. So if anybody wants that also later, I will probably send it out Wednesday in class. But yeah, if anybody has questions.
I was wondering, so I looked at the website and it's like said that there was a lot of news coverage. So I was wondering, based on that coverage in the news and social media, have any changes like came as a result, either in the stories of the specific people featured or just for the cause in general?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So yeah, at the beginning, we didn't think we were gonna get that exposure because the project was just made with the intention for community to have a mural, right, representing their stories. But because a lot of honestly, I don't really know what happened. It just blew up out of the nowhere. I did make a press release, so that was available, but I made it just because I wanted to document the whole experience, not just through like the documentary or photos, but throughout, just like a regular project. But through the mural project exposure through like the media, a lot of people found out about it. They were able to understand a little bit more that it's not just the DACA recipients that are, vulnerable to deportation in the US, but communities before that have been displaced, right? So that was good to kind of clear that misconception or to educate people through art and the story sharing. One of the biggest things that I feel and I can think of right now is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib went to Playas de Tijuana. She met up with Tania Mendoza and provided her support in her case. So for me, when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's amazing. I couldn't make it out there because I go to school and I was teaching at that time. So, but I was so proud to see that, that there was interest. She was able to see the border wall and the mural, and they're still in contact. So, I mean, those things only happen when there's a big effort behind it, right? And for me, that was just like, okay, we're doing something right. And I mean, it's moving slow, but it's more than nothing, because there's no one else reaching out, right? There's no one here asking like, how can I help and support? But then she did provide that. So it gave, I feel like in Tanya's case, it gave her some hope that something good can happen. But unfortunately, it's going to take time. But for me, that was the biggest thing. And besides the presentations, and just people interested in the project, it's just knowing that the storytellers are getting that exposure that they deserve, right? So people are knowing about Isaac's case. And more so right now with the pandemic, both his parents passed away due to COVID, and they live like 20 minutes from where he lives in Tijuana. And he couldn't even apply for a humanitarian visa to go back to San Diego. So that was heartbreaking, to see that, and to know that the fact that just Border Patrol apprehended him was just the biggest mistake, right? In his case, and he had nothing to do with that. So it's just sad that in his case, I see that he continues to get punished for something he didn't do, and just because he was taken as a minor to the US. So yeah, I feel like in his case, I wish people would understand that a little bit more, right? That it just doesn't stop at deportation. It continues to really hurt them beyond that. So that's something that we're working on his new story, for people to get that, because we all suffered through the pandemic, or still are suffering, right? So I think that it helps people to connect with stories. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
My internet was down, so I left, but I was just gonna say, as you were presenting, the word that you kept on coming back to, and I thought it was really important, was the word displacement, and how it is important to sort of bring that to the forefront. And I sort of started thinking of my own family story with immigration, and the mixed status household. And when my stepfather was deported, my family said we moved to Tijuana. And so as you were, sort of sharing your work and sort of amplifying other people's voices, I said, no, my family was displaced to the border. So it was sort of a moment of realization for myself in terms of how we tell ourselves sort of our own family story. So, and I've thought of that word before, and sort of in other contexts, but in a very personal way. You sort of, anyway. So I sort of just made that observation, and anyway, es comentario.
No, see, and I feel that's important, right? To see how we tell our stories. I know of families, and it's a story that I'm currently working on, that before this, the Leave No One Behind Your project, the family wouldn't talk about the deportation of their son, who was a military veteran. So they would just say he left to Mexico, and he left to Mexico and left to Mexico. But once they opened up about it, they're like, no, he was deported. After serving the country, he was deported. So you have to kind of name these things. And I know there's this conversation within Mexico about saying, I was not deported, I was, forced out or taken out of the country. But you have to name it as deportation, because that's what it is, right? That's the action that the government is taking towards this community. So if we don't name things the way that they are, then we're not going to make it so visible for people to see that it's a trend, right? And then there's links that are saying that communities of color are the ones who are being taken out of the US. So I feel like there's an importance of naming things. So that's why I really appreciate the Humanizing Deportation Archive, and then this project and the new one as well, that they're allowing people to see the truth, right? And the truth from community themselves, and not just numbers or how the media covers the stories. Yeah.
And I have another, and I don't want to ask all the questions. Hopefully some of the others in the room can ask a few, but one question that I did have, because I talk with my students about this, you're in the PhD program, you're sort of working through it. Any advice, thoughts on how is the other side? Do you recommend it? Do you not recommend it? And I ask because I think it's kind of the second part too. I think what you're doing in terms of reinventing or sort of reimagining what it means to be a young academic or an academic in the 21st century. I have this image of like J-Lo and like Nicki Minaj, how they're like rappers, singers, moguls, entrepreneurs. It's like, you know, and the list goes on. And I sort of see that in terms of all of the different moving parts with your research, right? There's storytelling, there's like community outreach, there's activism, you know, there's art and so on. And, you know, but so those were sort of the two things, like recommended, and also how you yourself are sort of creating this path for yourself in terms of what it means to be, you know, an up and coming or a rising sort of scholar slash star right in the field.
Yeah, thank you for that. I didn't even think of it like that. I do feel like it's a very lonely road, honestly. In my, I guess I'm very honest about my experience in grad school because I wish someone would have told me, right? First, I'm a first gen. There's no one else in my family in college, right? And my brothers tried it, they didn't like it. But I'm the oldest one from the three of us, so I've always liked school. That was like my safe haven, like growing up in Compton and then like moving to Fresno after. So for me, school was that place that I felt like I belonged, right? So I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I just didn't know that I wanted to be a college professor. So that's where everything changed when I finished high school, and that I knew that I wanted to do more than just, um, to outlive like the dreams my grandparents had, because my grandparents wanted to be teachers in Mexico, but that didn't work out. So it's gonna be hard. I never will discourage anyone from pursuing the doctorate, route. There's so many things you can do with a PhD. You don't just have to teach. You can do so many other things. So as a grad student, that's what I'm trying to check out. I'm just trying to figure out, yes, that's my end goal, to be a professor, tenure track, right? To stay and be legit, I would say. But I also love like filmmaking. I love photography. I love art. So for me, the only way that I'm still in the PhD was because I got that Mellon Public Scholars Fellowship. Um, I was ready to leave in the winter of 2019 because the microaggressions were just too hard. Like, and I'm a very strong person. So for me to say I'm leaving, it was because I'm leaving and I'm gonna apply to another program that deserves me, right? That really understands my work. So that didn't happen because that day that I cleared out my office, that's the night that I got that email from the Mellon Public Scholars. So I was like, oh, okay, this is a sign I should stay. So I'm so thankful that, that I did, but I knew that my worth wasn't appreciated, right, at Davis. But then with this project, I showed everyone like digital public humanities matters, and it matters because community matters. So it's not just about reading books and talking about books that are like centuries old, right? But it's talking about the real things that are happening right now. So like immigration, deportation, just the human face behind a lot of the things that are happening in our world right now. So for me, that became more of a personal, like mantra, basically, to say I believe in the things that I feel within me to continue this program. So now that I'm gonna finish next year, it feels like I'm so happy I didn't leave. I'm so happy that, yes, I'm like overworking myself, because it's like you're living two different lives. You're living this, this activist or community organizer life that is tied into your scholarship, but at the end of the day, you still have to produce the scholarship stuff, right? So present in conferences, which I enjoy, publish, right? Or to just even teach and do your dissertation. So it's two different lives, but I try to combine them together. So at the end of the day, it's worth it, right? Especially if someone with my background, there's no one else in my family in college. And my parents don't really speak English. So it's kind of like you're just navigating everything on your own, but then you're even more proud because you did. So I'm not gonna say it's easy, because it's not. You just have to find the right advisors. So I'm so thankful that I have like Marcel Montoya and then Robert Irwin, supporting me in everything that they can. But yeah, I just had to find the strength to not give up and always remember why you started, because it does get hard. So I just can't imagine what's gonna happen after the PhD, but we'll figure it out. Yeah.
I just feel like I'm gonna go into the field now and like play football, and I don't even know how to play football. I don't even know how to throw a ball. So thank you for that.
I have a question. When creating the mural and like listening to everyone's stories and like you as yourself, like having a background with immigration and like statuses and stuff like that, like was there like a specific moment that you remember that was just like very overwhelming? Like it like hit you out like all of a sudden when creating all of this?
Yes. So, when we first, I don't know, I feel like because we were so into the project. So I started this project once I became ABD, which means all but dissertation, right? So I became a candidate. So that was a long process. And then I basically like submerged myself into this new project, Applies at Tijuana. So we were just so into working and getting it all together. We were working like 14 hours at night. So it was like long days for 9 days. So I didn't really have the time to like look within or reflect on the project. It was just like go, go, go. So the moment that it hit me, like what we've done and like the stories was in January when, oh no, you know what? I'm lying. It's in February. So when I went the last time that we worked on the project, I was with Tanya and then one of my other friends who was seeking asylum. And it was just the three of us. We were painting, and it was super quiet in Plaza Tijuana. And I remember we're just pasting the QR codes, and I told Tanya, like, Tanya, I feel sad. She's like, why? We were having, a good time. I'm like, I just realized that this project exists because you guys experienced all of these things, right? So it hit me there that yes, this project is beautiful and powerful, but it shouldn't exist, right? Like these things should not have happened to you guys. So it just kind of hit me there that, wow, people are admiring this project, but we're not really looking at the roots of why this happened to you all. So it made me feel guilty, but at the same time, like, no, we can't stay within that, emotional state, but push forward to say we don't need more murals about immigrants. We don't need, especially right now with like social media, we don't need more artwork reflecting the violence that our community is going through. Why don't we just fix the things, right? So we don't have to create these things. So it just hit me there that like, wow, like if everyone who creates all this powerful art or like writes books would just use their energy for something, I'm not saying that's not productive, but more productive, like real impact, then we wouldn't need these conversations, but we're not doing that. So it just kind of made me feel like, wow, you know? So it was just understanding that everyone's stories matters. But yeah, I think that was like the biggest thing for me with that project. That's where the urge to continue working on it came, because I was like, we can't stop right now. Because I did have a lot of people telling me that we should stop talking about the project, that it's done, leave it alone, don't go fix it, like let it fade out. But we can't do that because they are still alive. They still want their stories to be communicated. And then I have people like Tanya and Isaac like saying, Liz, when are you coming back so we could go paint? So why am I going to take that away from them? Like, that's not right. So yeah, I think that was the biggest moment. Yeah.
So then kind of tying off of that, do you have plans to go back and add to it? Of course, after COVID, some kind of normalcy happens.
Yeah, so that's my goal, right? So before I finish the PhD at Davis, I do have funding right now, just chilling. I can't use it at the moment because I want to allocate those funds for that. But I presented for Pace University last week in New York, and they want to collaborate. So they want to help me just by sharing the project. So even like if it's printing posters or flyers and then having them all over New York. I'm also looking into a billboard. So I'm looking into expanding that to different like places where I presented, right? So hopefully with you guys too, like if anyone's interested, or with Yale, or like in Florida, like everyone who has invited me to present, to be like, hey, now can you help me with this, right? So I think that's a good way to kind of like still stay in touch and, to support the project in that way and create visibility beyond the border. Because at the moment, I mean, the border would be ideal, but I mean, we have to work through COVID and just the restrictions and being in person. So I mean, I think that would be a great opportunity. So yeah, like my goal is to always do that. I'm also working on a book right now about the project. So that's gonna take a while, but it's something that I want to do. Yeah.
As you say, like we need to find the roots of the problem, and I wanted to know where do you think, like, where do you think those roots are? Like, and what policies could be made if you have them. You can tell us.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that question. So right now with the Leave No One Behind Mural project, we've been able to identify different proposals, right, that can really support the return of displaced and deported communities, especially those who have been criminalized. So it's called the New Way Forward Act, and I could share that all that information with Erica. So that act would really allow anyone who was deported for, like, for example, marijuana charges, which is legal in many of our states, like in California. Then they will be able to return back to the US, and the United States government would be the one providing all the money and the fees. They'll cover everything. So that's just, we need people to get behind that and to call their congressmen and just really push forward and say, are you supporting the return of deported veterans, for example, right? Like, who doesn't support veterans? And veterans who have been deported are also, they also matter. So that's what we're doing with the Leave No One Behind. We're really pushing forward for the New Way Forward Act, and really just, making people understand that a lot of these rooted causes for their deportation was because they're brown, they're migrant communities, they probably speak another language. So anyone who's not, white or white passing is basically the ones who face deportation. So it all goes back to a lot of the cases that we work with, for example, like Dania's case. It's because back in the day, there was this program called Safe Communities, so secure communities. So that means that the police had a contract, or still do have contracts with ICE. So if you get detained, then they pass you over to ICE for detention or deportation. So if we stop those little things happening from within our communities, right, like locally, then you are kind of like dismantling slowly this system. But it's only if we inform people about these things. So I think that with a lot of the social movements and dismantling ICE or getting rid of, deportation, we need to educate people about how this has been in place for so many years. And then with the Clinton era, the same thing. There was amnesty before that administration. That's how my parents became residents. But then that means that we had a heightened criminalizing aspect. So more people were deported after that. So it's like, yes, we're going to grant security for a few, but then everyone else that comes after that, there's no more. So that's the danger that I see right now with this new administration, with the Biden administration, that yes, they're going to protect a few, which is, again, the DACA recipients, the dreamers that deserve it, right? That we're talking about deservingness, because that's what our system looks like. But then what about the parents, right, that brought them in? Are they going to get covered? And now with the pandemic, it seems like farm workers might be included. But what about everyone else who had already faced the repercussions, right, from beyond the Trump era? Because it seems that we're only focusing on Trump. What about, Barack Obama, which is known as the porter in chief? Like, we're not talking about them. So why don't we just, I feel like with this new project, we're actually trying to educate people to make those calls. We have all of the, we made a script that you can just use and call in your free time. It takes like 3 minutes. You call them, let them know that this is what you want, and, and they have to listen to you. So I do invite you all, to follow the Leave No One Behind Mural project. We're going to have more phone banking opportunities, and that you could just, do it with us, and then you probably could do it on your own as well. So yeah, I was going to say the New Way Forward Act, and Jan actually posted it here on the chat as well. Thank you.
Any final thoughts, any final comments from anyone? I know class has ended technically 2 minutes ago, so we'll end, briefly, but I do want to make sure that if you were sort of waiting to ask a question or make a comment, I just want to make sure that everyone does feel like they had a chance to speak up. No? Bueno, just one final sort of question that I have, and I understand that your work is sort of connected to the deportations of I'm assuming Mexicans.
Yeah.
But so I'm wondering if you look at like Central American stories and sort of their connection to the Tijuana border space, and then also. And I ask this because, and this because you're involved in the critical storytelling global borderlands. The U.S.-Mexico border becomes sort of this performative space that other countries around the world sort of look to, or sort of are drawn to or interested. So anyways, I was thinking about that sort of Centroamericanos or South Americans. And then also, like when I was there and I saw your mural, I was just moved the way and I took pictures of it and all that stuff, but because it's just amazing. But I agree with you, it sort of comes from pain and sort of thinking of the border as a site of pain, trauma. And I'm sorry, I'm sort of going everywhere. The question the other sort of question comment that I had connected to you as Central Americans was, I'm thinking of how these these voices of the community are sort of put on the mural by people themselves, right? Not necessarily like a government. And I'm thinking about sort of the ongoing and growing presence of Haitians in Tijuana and sort of their stories. So anyway, so those are, again, I understand sort of the importance and the magnitude of your project, and it's already massive, but I'm really just curious to hear your thoughts on it. Not necessarily like, oh, you should be working on it. It doesn't matter what I think in terms of that, but anyway, that was sort of my Centroamericanos y Haitianos.
Yeah, so actually that aspect, right, of Haitians and like Central Americans or like people seeking asylum is covered under the Humanizing Deportation Project, right? So for my dissertation, unfortunately, I have to center on like one specific community, right, which is the Mexican American experience. So for me, that was, like something I had to negotiate, because if I expand too much, then the message does get lost, right? So I really wanted to center on that. But in the future, I do want to work and continue working with like folks who have sought asylum, and I'm in contact with them. So now that they're in the US, that's something that I want to explore, what's happening to them now that they're in the US. And there's 2 cases that are the ones who are really speaking to me, how hard it is for them to get a job, to find, like how do they bring back their families here to the US, So yes, I'm exploring that as well. And it's really nice for me to also share that when we were creating the mural in Tijuana, we had folks from Central America. So for example, Honduras, helping us create the mural, and people from El Salvador. So it allowed me to see that, yes, this issue is not just US and Mexico, but everyone. So people who would see the mural from like other countries, right, besides Mexico, they identified with it. So for me, that was like, okay, like we're all in dialogue and everyone deserves their own, like expertise in this topic, because I didn't just want to cover like a different, landscape of nationalities that were impacted by deportation. But with the Leave No One Behind mural project, we are. So we have around 11 nationalities that are being portrayed in the murals. So that's what we're trying to like push forward for that. But unfortunately with the Plaza Tijuana, it stayed just within the US and Mexico experience. But I mean, in the future, you never know. We can always expand, and the stories are there. We're just waiting to have the space to really, create that mural. Yeah.
Muy bien. That's okay, Kenneth. It's if you need to go. I mean, it's okay. Anything else? Anyone? No. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for this excellent presentation. I just look forward to reading your book and sort of just seeing where your work takes you. Thank you for being a role model for many of us. So anyway, I can't stop just complimenting you. I need to stop.
No, thank you so much. Yeah. Gracias a todos. It's really nice to talk about the project, and feel free to contact me for anything that you may need or questions. Yeah.
Muy bien. Bueno, Kenneth dice gracias por tu tiempo. Bueno, pues clase es todo. Nos vemos el miércoles, and then on Wednesday we have Magali Lopez. For if you're in the room and you want to come back, Lizbeth. Sí, gracias. Bueno, me despido ya si se quieren ir. Adiós y que tengan un buen día.
Bye.